So, Dad, tell me about your earliest memories growing up. I know you remember hydro coming on and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I remember that they turned the hydro on at home on my birthday in 1928 when I was 2 years old. And you'd probably wonder why I can remember that, but anyway, the part I remember was going upstairs at night, and the young girls lived across the road, and they used to babysit us a lot. And that's the part I can remember. We went upstairs, and I can remember him turning the light on the north stairs, and that was my birthday when I was 2 years old, 1928.
So, what was the house like then?
Well, it was about the same as it was when you grew up, Terry. Although we fixed it over and put a furnace in and changed some of the, put in some big windows, more than that. Basically, the plan of the house was the same, and there were still the two stairways and the two basements. With us kids used to sleep up the north stairs, and hired man slept up the south stairs, and my mother and dad they slept up the north stairs as well, in the room that looked out on the peach tree. But we didn't change it a lot till your mom and I got married, and then we redid the house and did the old woodshed, changed it over to the family room. And I can't tell you what year that was. It was all after 1958, anyway,
Right.
or 59. And so we made the woodshed into a family room, and then, of course, the year before that, I put the bathroom in what used to be the old pantry, and fixed over the kitchen and put the cupboards in. That was in '58 before your mom and I got married.
Right, and this piece here, this cupboard here was in the pantry, right?
Yeah, that was in the pantry, and yeah, in the pantry that sat just inside the door, and then there were built-in cupboards to the left with an old flour bin there that they used to have, and um, an old table in there, and sometimes they'd wash dishes in there, and one thing and another, and then that held the plates and the cups and one thing and another.
Now, the other buildings on the farm, I mean, some aren't there, but they were houses in the original farmstead, right? Like the old grind shed, was that
Yeah,
a
the
house?
grind shed. The farm used to be uh, two separate farms, and the old barn that you remember down the end
Right.
of the lane, that was the barn on the east half. The Whitelocks lived there years ago, and the old grind shed was the house which belonged to that farm, and it was over in the middle of the 4 acres there. And one time the old well dropped in. I had a horse fall in there when we were cutting hay.
So where was the well?
It was,
It was by the old barn. There was.
the well was in the middle of well, actually, the orchard was about 1 acre, and then the 3 acres on the west side were the edge of where the old barn sat. And that's where the well was there. But the buildings were north of, a bit north, or a bit south of that.
Right.
Yeah,
So the old grind shed was that.
yeah. The old
Was
grind
there.
was the house that came from that. Well, it would be, what would it be, 47 and a half acres, I guess it was.
Okay.
There were two separate farms at one time.
And who bought that? Or did Grandpa buy that, or did,
Um,
or is that before? Was that Grandpa's dad who?
yeah, my great grandfather bought the place where the house and the barns are now, and that was in 1961 when they first come up there. And then they bought the other half of the farm later. I always thought they bought it in about '63, but I found an old deed that said 1870 on it, so it
Okay.
was a few years afterwards. And then, of course, I had a Dieseltine place in 1962.
Right. And you tiled it. I remember as a kid, you
Yeah,
tiling that forever. It seemed every year we were tiling something.
well, yeah. Bill Cattle came and tiled it the first year, the first fall, I guess it was, after when I first bought it, it had wheat in it. Dick had wheat in it and about 10 acres of sod. And so that fall, Bill Cattle tiled it, and yeah, I've got a map at home, an aerial view of the tile. That's how he did it. He would take he of course had his own airplane. And after he got it tiled, you could see all the strips and where they were. And so he took an aerial view of all the time that he did. Then another year or two, we did some more in the backfield, and then some up in the front part too.
So the creek used to be fuller than it is now, right? You used to talk about swimming in the creek. Did you?
Yeah, well, actually, where we used to swim was right straight down from where our new house is.
Okay.
And it wasn't that deep, but maybe it might still be 2 feet or 2.5 feet deep. It was probably the deepest spot in the creek.
Right.
We used to swim there, and then we used to be back on down behind Bill Holly's barn. We used to have that dammed up when we were kids and swam down there.
So what else did you and Aunt Doris do to play? What did you?
Oh, I don't know. We spent time with the Dennises. They were cousins, of course, Mac and Florence and Mary. And then I spent a lot of time with the Williamsons, with Nyla and Laura and Cecil. But oh, I don't know. As far as playing goes, I really don't know. We played house in some of the old
Right.
buildings there, and one thing and another, and spent time with cousins and went back and forth a lot. And then, of course, we were always involved with the church, and so I guess we went to church from the time I was about 2 years old,
Right.
I guess.
So what was the community like? How different was it then and now?
Well, it was a lot different, really. Delmer was, all of the old, and there are quite a few new homes there, but the older homes in Delmer, everybody belonged to the community. Everybody, the church and school were the center of the community, and everybody in Delmer and all the surrounding areas, from down the 12th concession up to our road on the 8th, everybody belonged to the Delmer church, and most people had hired men those days, and we had a big young peoples, 25 to 30 young people met there. I don't know whether it was every other week or not. I think they met, and it was pretty active. And the church was, I'd say it was at least 3/4 full every Sunday. And Sunday school, of course, when I was involved with the Sunday school, I guess in the 50s, I was superintendent. And there were 80 some odd people attending Sunday school. At that time we had classes for all ages. And, my mother and dad were in what they called the young married people's class at that time, and then there was the adult Bible class, and some of the older people, 75 to 85. But
Mhm.
everybody went to church and Sunday school at that time.
What the Brownsville or the Charge, the three churches? How did they? Were they always together that you remember, or?
Well, actually, Brownsville and Delmer joined according to history. They became a 2-point charge in 1975, I think, and had the manse built in, I'm sorry, 1875, and had the manse built in 1896. And Brownsville and Delmer have been a charge ever since. Cloden, and then of course Church Union came in 1925, and Brownsville and Delmer joined in the United Church, but the Cloden Church didn't come in until 1930. There was a Presbyterian and a Methodist church, both, and they closed, and I think, and went into one church. But the church that joined was in an old older Presbyterian church, and they
So-
came in 1930.
So were they were self-sufficient until then? They were their own.
I think they were on with Verschoyle. There were different charges. There was Verschoyle, Durham Center, I think, one time, and then there was Quince and Richmond, and some of those communities to the south. They belonged to that group for a while.
Right.
And then when Cloden came in 1930, why that made a 3-point charge, and yeah, they were, even through the Depression times, they were self-sufficient, and they stayed until 1973, and Cloden decided to close and join the Brownsville Church.
So do you remember? So you mentioned the Depression. Do you remember much about the Depression? Do you remember what it was like?
Yeah, I remember a lot about Depression. Things were pretty tough, and farmers, it was hard to make a living, and mortgage money was hard to get, and mortgage was about 5% at the time. I know my dad had Grandpa, your grandpa, had the Johnny Green place down on the corner, which is the Wilsons, and that was 5% mortgage, even though times were tough, and you could buy land for just a few $100, a 100-acre farm. But yeah, I can remember standing in the barn one night, and my dad had some cows to sell, and a guy by the name of Roy Jewell was a cattle drover, and he came in one night, and he bought 7 cows for $420. They were all cows beef cows cows that he wanted to turn off for beef. He didn't want to keep them the next year to milk, but that's what they were worth at that time. And about 31 or 32 was $200 a piece, and I can remember eggs were about 8 cents a dozen, and hogs were $3 a hundred. And then in 1937, when after my mother passed away, a lady named Mrs. Watts came and kept house for us, and she had 2 daughters in Windsor, in Detroit, and she used to. Her son would take her. She had 5 sons and 5 daughters, and occasionally they would take her to visit her 2 daughters in Detroit. And I can remember her saying that all along the highway, the old number 3 highway, there'd be signs on the gatepost: pigs $1 a piece, and wiener pigs $1 a piece. And then some places there were pigs they would give away. If people would come in, they would give their pigs away. They couldn't afford to feed them. So things were pretty tough in Depression times.
Do you remember Christmases? What Christmases were like?
Yeah, we had Christmas with Uncle Johnny Williamson's all the time when as long as my mother was alive. And we would go back and forth there, one year at Williamson's and one year at the Sandersons. And then we would have the Williamson reunion, and that was Vic Bradburn family, Lorraine Bradburn and Mamie Sanderson, my aunt, they were Williamsons, and so it was Spence Williamson, Mamie Williamson who married Stanley Sanderson, and Lorraine who married Vic Bradburn, and then my Uncle Johnny Williamson and our family, and the 5 of us used to get with Foster and Fred Haley as well. They were cousins.
Did you remember what you would get for Christmas?
Well, generally, we'd hang up your socks, and we'd probably get a chocolate Santa Claus or an orange or something like that. It was pretty small.
Okay, I'm just gonna stop because I think I can only